In the 1600s, in Scotland, plague was ravaging the country, and there was an old Puritan preacher and pastor called John Welsh. And the town that John Welsh lived in was visited by a band of tinkers, as they called them in those days. These were guys that went from town to town selling cloth, selling rags for cleaning, selling anything at the sell, I suppose. Just, I guess, the equivalent of today's door-to-door salesman. And these guys came to the town where John Welsh was a pastor. John Welsh went out with a delegation of magistrates to meet them, because obviously the plague was a serious thing. And John Welsh and all the people roundabout knew that if somebody got into your town with the plague, it was a good chance that maybe 80% of the people in that town were going to die. So John Welsh went out and he met the men on the road, and they had a certificate from the town that they just come from saying that they were totally plague free. John Welsh took a look at the men, looked at the sack that they were carrying, paused in prayer for a while, and then, as if God spoke to him, John Welsh said, "The plague is in the sack, you're not coming in." The tinkers took their wares, went to the next town about 20 miles away. They got in there no problem, because they had a certificate saying they were plague free. They got into the town, started selling their stuff, and plague broke out in the town, and almost everybody in that town died. Now, what's the relevance of that story from 400 years ago to the crisis that we're facing today? Well, there's a lot of relevance. First of all, if you let people that are infected into your town, your country, your island, there's a very, very good chance that they're going to infect other people. And once they're in and the virus is in, it's very difficult to stop. So the reality is this: the modern day plague that we're facing, the coronavirus, and of course, depending on who you listen to, some people just say it's like the flu, other people say it's a terrible, deadly virus. I would, just from what I've read and what I've seen happening, I would say it's a very, very serious thing, and that it needs to be taken seriously, and it should have been taken seriously from the very, very beginning. But the reason this has happened, and the reason that this has spread, and this is what nobody's talking about, the reason that this has spread so widely is because of globalization. Who's to blame for the coronavirus plague 2020? The globalists are to blame, because they opened the borders and let anybody in. Look at the worst affected countries in Europe, and nobody's talking about this. The worst affected countries in Europe are countries in the so-called Schengen zone, or the Schengen area, where you have complete free movement, or you had complete free movement. You don't have it anymore because they've all cottoned on and they've wised up. I personally hope that this will be the finish of the EU. We thought Brexit was going to be the finish of the EU, but I think this will be the finish of the EU. Because I tell you what, when the Italians come out of this, which I hope they do, there's no guarantees that civil society in Western Europe will ever be the same again after this. But if the Italians come out of this, if the Spanish come out of this, are they really going to want to stay in that stinking, rotten edifice called the EU that has allowed and encouraged and facilitated this? And then when we look at what's happening in the UK, why were 100 flights a day coming in from China when this was at its peak in China? Why, when it broke out in Italy, and it was obviously a very, very severe situation in Italy, why, when that happened in Italy, were flights allowed into the country? Why didn't they just ban all foreign travel immediately? That's my question. And these questions aren't being answered. And these questions aren't even being asked by the media. The media are criticising Boris Johnson for technical decisions that he's making. The real criticism should be that the borders should have been completely closed once it was obvious what was happening in China, which to all accounts we knew about this in January, because when I was over for a conference in January, when I was over with work in January, we were getting a bit nervous when we were seeing Chinese people. And that's not a racist comment, incidentally. It's just purely simply because we knew what was happening in China, and you suddenly became aware of lots of Chinese people wearing masks in London. So the blame of this can be laid squarely at the people that used to chant at us when we did demos for Brexit, and when we did demos about the Islamic terrorism, when we did demos about grooming gangs and all those issues. We had these so-called stand-up to racism Antifa types in our faces chanting, "Say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here." Well, I wonder will their chant be, "Say it loud, say it clear, coronavirus is welcome here"? Because that's what their policies that they've encouraged, and that their friends in the liberal elite and their friends in the liberal media have encouraged, the open border nonsense that there's no nation state anymore. Well, there seem to be a lot of nation states popping up all over Europe at the minute. If anything good comes out of this, and I don't know how anything good can come out of this, if anything good comes out of it, maybe we will actually start making stuff ourselves, buying it ourselves, and not importing everything that China throws at us, including deadly viruses. And yet still our government's wedded to this idea of buying electronic infrastructure for the new 5G network from China. Well, let's see how that goes for you. But what do we do? What do the people of the United Kingdom do? Now, we've been all told to isolate. We've been told that our grannies, granddads, mums and dads are going to have to be locked away for 12 weeks for their own good. And that's fair enough. I get all that. I 100% think it's the right thing to do, is to isolate ourselves in terms of not getting too close to people physically, in terms of not going to big gatherings. I think all those things are very, very good and sensible ideas. But I think there's going to come a time where the Patriot movement, and this video, it's going up on YouTube for anyone to see, but it's really for the groups of people that we all marched with in 2017, 2018, 2019, demo after demo, about these issues, about globalization, about the European Union, about open borders policies. We didn't know this was coming. We didn't see it coming. But this is a consequence, a direct consequence of globalization and an open door policy. The global village. So, what do we do? What do we do about this? How do we react as a group of patriots? Well, I know some of our number have already started organising. I believe that Kaz has got a group going on in her area where they're organising to look after old people. There's a lot going on in Northern Ireland where local community groups are getting involved in helping elderly people, taking food to elderly people. And that's got to be ramped up. And this is a time where the people of Britain have got to stand together. And the people in the Patriot movement particularly have got to stand together. And we have a network with thousands of people in it. We've got the new group Hearts of Oak. Thousands of people signed up to that website, to the new website. We've got UK Freedom Movement, we've got the Veterans Against Terrorism, we've got the football, the DFLA, the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, we've got the South East Division, we've got Tommy's People. There's literally thousands of people engaged. We've got all the lads up in the North East, Mickey Hopper, and the lads up there that got elected to council for UKIP. We've got all those lads and lasses right the way throughout this country who can make a difference and who can mobilise and help where help's needed. And I think that our movement, we call ourselves patriots, our movement has got to stand up now and stand for the country. We've got to stand up now and stand for our local communities and do anything we can to help people in whatever way necessary. Now, I know many of us are involved in business, and the business I'm involved in has been absolutely devastated, or the business sector I'm involved in has been absolutely devastated by this virus. Events are not happening, sporting events are not happening, concerts are not happening, broadcast events are not happening. So my sector has been completely devastated by this. But what we can do is we can check on our elderly relatives, our elderly neighbours, our elderly friends. I mean, my parents live in the northeast of England, and I'd like to think some of the lads up in the northeast, if I asked them, would go and lend a hand to my parents if they needed it. And the same as over here. If we can do anything to help people in Northern Ireland who are struggling, who are suffering, who can't get what they need, we need to have a network set up that can actually help those people and give those people what they want and what they need when they need it. And I know there's a lot of people doing that on social media, but I think more of that needs to happen. And I think the networks that we've got that are already set up, they're the ideal medium for doing that. And that's how I think we can shine in this. I don't think we can do mass demos anymore. They're not going to happen. It's not going to be, it's going to be a PR disaster. If we do mass demonstrations now, they're going to be a complete PR disaster, because people are going to look at them and say, what are they doing gathering in such large numbers? But what we can do is get together in small groups and mobilise in small groups and help pensioners, help vulnerable people, help people that are literally living in poverty because of this, with food and shelter and all that sort of thing. So this is a time where I believe that all the groups in our movement can stand together as one, and we can make a difference to this country that will suffer a great deal. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. I think that I don't believe that this virus is some sort of wacko conspiracy theory. I believe this virus is real, and I believe that we haven't even seen anything yet. I believe things are going to get far, far worse. But we as patriots need to do whatever we can to help our country. So that's just me putting it out there. I haven't got any more ideas than just saying we need to do something. Like I say, there's people already doing it all over the country, and fair play to them. But there needs to be more, and it's a time for us to stand up and be counted and put our money where our mouth is, or put our boots on the ground to help the little old lady that's living up the road, or the little old lady from your church. And finally, and I know I always say this whenever I talk about this, I'm probably the worst example of Christianity that anybody will ever meet. But I believe that we need, as a nation, to pray for our country, and pray that the God of the Bible that most of our laws were founded on, that God will intervene and help us in another testing time for the United Kingdom. So that's it. That's all I really want to say. I don't know anything about the science. I don't know anything about the medicine, but I know this, that our country needs us to stand up and be counted. Like I say, I mentioned Kaz earlier. She's going out and doing her stuff, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And there's lots of other people who are standing up and doing it as well. And we all need to do it. We all need to help where we can and do what we can for people that are in most need in this dire situation. See you all soon.